In a small, quiet town, 12-year-old Zoe Carter and her grandmother Evelyn share a bond as warm and comforting as the baked goods they create together. What begins as a simple bake sale to help with mounting medical bills turns into a story of resilience, heartbreak, and hope. Faced with an unexpected act of injustice, Zoe must summon courage far beyond her years to stand up for her grandmother and for herself. Through moments of kindness from strangers and the unshakable support of her community, Zoe's small act of love grows into something far greater than she could have ever imagined. But the road is not without its challenges. Loss, self-doubt, and the weight of responsibility threaten to derail her dreams. How does Zoe transform grief into purpose? What legacy will she carry forward in her grandmother's name? And how does a single act of kindness ripple outward to change countless lives? The first light of dawn filtered through the thin, faded curtains of Evelyn Carter's modest home. It was an old, weather-worn house with peeling paint and creaky floorboards. But to 12-year-old Zoe Carter, it was the coziest place in the world. Evelyn, Zoe's grandmother, had raised her ever since Zoe's parents died in a car accident when she was a baby. Despite the house's many flaws, it had always been filled with warmth, laughter, and the mouth-watering aroma of Evelyn's baked goods. This morning, the kitchen buzzed with activity. Zoe stood on a stool at the counter, carefully decorating cookies with bright icing. Beside her, Evelyn moved slowly but steadily, her frail hands rolling out dough for a fresh batch of biscuits. Her movements were labored, but her face wore the same serene smile that Zoe found so comforting. "How are the cookies coming, sweetheart?" Evelyn asked, leaning heavily on the counter for support. "They are perfect," Zoe replied, grinning as she added another sprinkle of rainbow sugar. "I think everyone is going to love them." Evelyn chuckled, though it turned into a faint cough. "I am sure they will. With your talent, no one will be able to resist." Zoe beamed with pride, though her smile faltered when she glanced at her grandmother. Evelyn's health had been declining steadily over the past year. Her once lively demeanor had been replaced by exhaustion, and her medical bills had become a burden that neither she nor Zoe could bear alone. It was Zoe's idea to start the bake sale. She wanted to help in any way she could, and baking was something she and her grandmother loved to do together. The sale was simple, just a folding table on their front lawn, a banner Zoe had drawn with markers, and trays of cookies, muffins, and brownies. But to Zoe, it was a chance to do something meaningful. By mid-morning, the bake sale was underway. The sweet scent of freshly baked goods filled the air as neighbors stopped by, offering encouraging smiles and generous tips. "These are delicious," said Mr. Whitaker, an older man who lived down the street, as he handed Zoe a $20 bill. "You are quite the entrepreneur, young lady." "Thank you, Mr. Whitaker," Zoe replied, her cheeks flushing with pride. "Every bit helps," Evelyn said softly, sitting in a lawn chair nearby. Her eyes shone with gratitude and a hint of pride in her granddaughter. The bake sale continued smoothly until midday, when the neighborhood grew quieter. Zoe was about to pack up when a black and white police cruiser pulled up to the curb. 3 uniformed officers stepped out, their stern expressions contrasting sharply with the cheerful atmosphere Zoe and Evelyn had worked so hard to create. "Good afternoon," said the tallest officer, whose badge read Bradley. He looked down at the table with a mix of disinterest and disdain. "We received a complaint about an unpermitted business operating here." Zoe's heart sank. "It is just a bake sale," she said, her voice trembling. Bradley ignored her and turned to Evelyn. "Ma'am, do you have a permit for this setup?" Evelyn straightened in her chair, her calm demeanor masking the unease growing inside her. "It is just a small bake sale," she explained. "We are raising money for medical bills. We are not causing any harm." "Rules are rules," Bradley said, crossing his arms. "No permit, no sale. You need to pack this up immediately." Zoe's stomach churned with frustration and fear. "But we are not doing anything wrong," she protested, her voice shaking. Evelyn reached out to squeeze Zoe's hand. "Hush, sweetie. Let me handle this." But as Evelyn tried to reason with Bradley, he remained unmoved. "Confiscate the money," he barked to another officer. "Shut this down." Zoe's heart pounded as she watched the officer grab the jar of money they had earned. Tears welled up in her eyes. "You cannot take that," she cried, stepping in front of the table. "Step aside," Bradley said sharply. When Evelyn tried to stand to intervene, her legs gave out, and she collapsed to the ground. Zoe screamed and rushed to her side as her grandmother groaned in pain. The commotion drew the attention of neighbors, who began gathering at a distance. Some pulled out their phones to record the scene, their murmurs growing louder with each passing moment. "This is unnecessary," said Mrs. Green, a middle-aged woman who lived across the street. "They are just a child and an elderly woman trying to make ends meet." Bradley glared at her. "Mind your business, ma'am." The officers eventually left, leaving behind a chaotic scene. The table was overturned, baked goods were scattered across the ground, and Evelyn was clutching her side in pain. Zoe knelt beside her, tears streaming down her face. "Grandma, are you okay? Please say something," she pleaded. "I will be fine, sweetheart," Evelyn whispered, though her pale face told a different story. Mr. Whitaker, who had been watching from his porch, approached them. His voice was filled with anger and resolve. "This was completely uncalled for," he said. "I am calling the city council. They need to hear about this." Evelyn managed a weak smile. "Thank you, Mr. Whitaker. That means a lot." As Zoe helped her grandmother into the house, she felt a storm of emotions: anger, sadness, and helplessness. But as she cleaned up the mess left behind, a new emotion began to stir within her: determination. "We will try again, Grandma," she said quietly. "We will not give up." Evelyn looked at her granddaughter, her eyes filled with both pride and sorrow. "I know we will not, Zoe," she said softly. "I know we will not." That night, as Zoe lay in bed, staring at the cracks in the ceiling, she made a silent vow. She would not let this setback define them. There had to be a way to move forward, a way to help her grandmother and prove that kindness and resilience could triumph over cruelty. In the distance, a faint breeze rustled the trees, as if whispering words of encouragement. And in her heart, Zoe knew she would find a way. The morning after the disastrous bake sale, Zoe sat in the small kitchen, her hands wrapped around a mug of lukewarm tea. She stared at the table, where crumbs from their once beautiful cookies clung stubbornly to the edges. The kitchen, normally alive with the comforting hum of her grandmother's voice and the aroma of freshly baked treats, felt cold and empty. In the next room, Evelyn lay on the couch, bundled in blankets. Her breathing was slow and steady, but Zoe could still see the pain etched into her features. The sight of her grandmother, so frail, only strengthened the knot of worry in her chest. A soft knock at the front door broke through the stillness. Zoe jumped up, wiping her eyes quickly before opening it. Standing on the porch was a woman in her early 40s with auburn hair pulled into a neat ponytail and a kind smile that reached her eyes. "Hi, I am Claire Johnson," the woman said, holding out her hand. "I work with the city's community support program. Some of your neighbors told me about what happened yesterday." Zoe hesitated, but shook her hand. "Hi," she said quietly. Claire crouched slightly, meeting Zoe's gaze. "Is your grandmother here? I would like to check in on her, if that is all right." Zoe stepped aside to let her in. Claire's eyes swept over the modest living room with its worn furniture and faded curtains. Evelyn looked up from the couch as Claire approached. "Hello, ma'am," Claire said gently. "I heard about what happened yesterday. I am so sorry you went through that." Evelyn offered a faint smile. "Thank you. I am fine, really. Just a little shaken up." Zoe frowned. her voice small but firm. "She is not fine. She fell, and they took all the money we made." Claire's expression softened as she turned to Zoe. "That is why I am here," she said. "I want to help." Evelyn shook her head, her pride surfacing despite her exhaustion. "We do not want to be a burden. We will manage." "You are not a burden," Claire insisted. "What happened was wrong, and the city has resources that can support families like yours. Please let me help." Evelyn glanced at Zoe, who looked back at her with hopeful eyes. After a moment, Evelyn sighed. "All right," she said softly. "Thank you." That afternoon, Claire returned with a grocery bag in one hand and a notebook in the other. She spread the contents on the kitchen table, a variety of baking supplies, flour, sugar, butter, and more. "These are donated from a local bakery that supports community initiatives," she explained. "They heard about your bake sale and wanted to pitch in." Zoe's eyes widened. "Really? They just gave this to us?" Claire nodded. "People want to help. Sometimes you just need to let them know how." Evelyn, sitting nearby, smiled weakly. "That is very kind of them." "There is more," Claire continued, sliding the notebook toward Zoe. "This is Lisa Carter's number. She is a retired teacher who used to run a baking club. She said she would love to meet you and help you with your next bake sale." Zoe hesitated. "You mean someone wants to teach me?" "Exactly," Claire said with a grin. "Lisa loves baking and teaching. I think you two will get along perfectly." The next morning, Zoe and Evelyn visited Lisa's home, a charming house with a neatly kept garden. Lisa greeted them warmly, her silver hair tied back in a loose bun. Her kitchen was filled with shelves of cookbooks, jars of spices, and the unmistakable aroma of cinnamon and vanilla. Come in," Lisa said, ushering them inside. "I have been dying to meet the little baking prodigy everyone is talking about." Zoe blushed. "I am not a prodigy." Lisa chuckled. "Well, you are about to be." For the next few hours, Lisa showed Zoe new techniques. How to make flaky pie crusts, whip cream to the perfect consistency, and even decorate cakes like a professional. Evelyn watched from a nearby chair, her eyes lighting up as Zoe absorbed every lesson with enthusiasm. "You have a real talent," Lisa said, handing Zoe a piping bag. "And more importantly, you have heart. That is what makes your baking special." Zoe's cheeks flushed with pride. "Thank you," she said softly. As they left, Lisa handed Zoe a box filled with baking tools, cookie cutters, piping tips, and a digital thermometer. "Consider this a starter kit," she said with a smile. "And remember, you are always welcome here." Over the next week, Zoe poured herself into her baking. With Lisa's guidance and Claire's encouragement, she felt a new sense of purpose. She wanted to prove that kindness and determination could overcome the setbacks they had faced. On Saturday morning, with Lisa's help, Zoe set up a new bake sale at the community center. This time, the setup was more professional. Tables draped in colorful cloths, neatly labeled treats, and a banner that read, "Baking for a Better Tomorrow." The response was overwhelming. Neighbors and strangers alike stopped by, eager to support the cause. Mr. Patel, the owner of the local grocery store, arrived with his wife and handed Zoe a $50 bill. "Keep the change," he said with a warm smile. "Your grandmother has been a friend to everyone in this neighborhood. It is time we gave back." By midday, the donation jar was filled to the brim, and Zoe's heart swelled with gratitude. She looked over at Evelyn, who was seated comfortably under a shade tree, chatting with a group of neighbors. For the first time in weeks, Evelyn's face was bright with hope. As the day wound down, Claire approached Zoe with a wide smile. "You did an amazing job," she said. "I am so proud of you." "Thank you," Zoe replied, her voice trembling with emotion. "But I could not have done it without everyone's help." Claire knelt beside her, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "That is what community is all about, Zoe. We lift each other up." That evening, as Zoe and Evelyn counted the money they had raised, Zoe felt a flicker of something she had not felt in a long time: hope. The kindness of strangers had not only saved their bake sale, but also reminded her that they were not alone in their struggles. "We can do this, Grandma," Zoe said with a determined smile. "We can keep going." Evelyn reached out to hold her hand, her eyes glistening. "Yes, we can," she whispered. "Because of you." Zoe lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling as her mind raced with ideas for the future. The world no longer seemed as daunting as it had before. With every act of kindness, every challenge overcome, she felt herself growing stronger. For the first time in what felt like forever, Zoe allowed herself to dream. The sun spilled golden light across the quiet neighborhood as Zoe tied her apron and set out her baking tools. The makeshift kitchen in their modest home had become her haven. Evelyn sat nearby in her favorite chair, her smile soft but weary. Though the success of the last bake sale had given them a much-needed boost, Evelyn's health continued to cast a shadow over their small victories. "Are you sure you do not want to rest, Grandma?" Zoe asked, kneading dough with careful precision. "I am resting right here," Evelyn replied with a playful smirk. "And I am keeping an eye on your technique. You know I cannot let you slack off." Zoe chuckled, though concern flickered in her chest. Her grandmother's voice lacked its usual strength, a reminder of how fragile things had become. A knock at the door interrupted their banter. Zoe wiped her hands on her apron and hurried to answer. It was Lisa, her mentor from the baking club. She stood there holding a basket overflowing with fresh ingredients: plump berries, fragrant spices, and silky chocolate. "I thought we could try something new today," Lisa said, stepping inside. Her warm energy seemed to fill the room, lifting some of the weight Zoe carried. "That looks amazing," Zoe said, her eyes lighting up. "What are we making?" Lisa set the basket on the counter and began unpacking it. "How about a layered berry tart? It is fancy, but not too difficult. I will show you all my tricks." As Lisa worked, she talked about her own life, weaving stories of triumphs and challenges. Zoe learned that Lisa had lost her family home in a fire years ago, an event that had left her starting from scratch. "I poured my heart into baking," Lisa said as she whisked cream into soft peaks. "It became my way of healing, my way of finding joy again." Zoe listened intently, the rhythmic motions of baking calming her nerves. She found comfort in Lisa's story. If Lisa could rebuild her life after losing so much, then maybe Zoe could face her own challenges too. When the tart was finished, its glossy berries glistening atop golden pastry, Lisa stepped back and admired Zoe's work. "You have a natural talent," she said, "and a lot of heart. That is a powerful combination." Zoe blushed, glancing at Evelyn, who gave her an encouraging nod. "Thanks," she said shyly. "I just want to make something good, something people will love." Lisa's expression turned serious. "Baking is more than making something good. It is about connection, about bringing people together. You are already doing that, Zoe." The following week, Lisa invited Zoe to her home kitchen for an intensive baking session. Evelyn insisted she go, promising she would be fine resting at home. Zoe hesitated but finally agreed, eager to learn more. Lisa's kitchen was a baker's dream. Marble counters, shelves lined with cookbooks, and tools Zoe had only seen in magazines. Lisa wasted no time, teaching Zoe how to make perfect puff pastry, craft delicate sugar flowers, and temper chocolate to a glossy sheen. "You can do this," Lisa said, watching as Zoe carefully layered dough for croissants. "You are stronger than you think." Zoe glanced up, her hands stilling for a moment. "Do you really think so?" Lisa smiled. "Absolutely. You have already faced more than most people your age, and you are still standing. That is strength." Zoe absorbed her words, her confidence growing with each new skill she mastered. By the end of the day, her croissants were golden, flaky, and filled with the unmistakable taste of hard work and determination. Back at home, Evelyn's condition worsened. Zoe noticed her grandmother moving more slowly, her coughs lasting longer. The joy of baking was tempered by the growing fear that time was slipping away. One evening, as Zoe cleaned up the kitchen, Evelyn called her over. "Sit with me for a moment, Zoe," she said, patting the space beside her on the couch. Zoe set down her dishcloth and joined her, the weight of her grandmother's frailty heavy on her heart. "You are doing so much," Evelyn said, her voice soft but steady. "And I could not be prouder of you. But I need you to promise me something." "What is it, Grandma?" Zoe asked, her chest tightening. "Promise me that no matter what happens, you will keep going, keep baking, keep spreading kindness, and keep dreaming. Do not let anything stop you." Zoe blinked back tears. "I promise," she whispered, "but I do not want to do it without you." Evelyn wrapped an arm around her. "You will never be without me, sweetheart. I will always be with you, in everything you do." The next bake sale was Zoe's most ambitious yet. With Lisa's guidance, she expanded her offerings to include intricate pastries and cakes. She set up at the community center again, where word of her efforts had spread. Neighbors arrived in droves, eager to support Zoe and Evelyn. Mr. Patel donated more ingredients, and Mrs. Green brought her friends to buy nearly everything on the table. Even strangers stopped by, drawn by the stories they had heard. "Your grandmother is a pillar of this community," one woman said, as she purchased a box of cookies. "And you are following in her footsteps." Zoe's heart swelled with pride. She worked tirelessly throughout the day, serving customers and sharing stories of Evelyn's kindness. That evening, as they packed up, Lisa pulled Zoe aside. "You are doing something incredible," she said, "but I want you to think bigger." "Bigger? How?" Zoe asked, puzzled. Lisa gestured around the bustling community center. "This is just the beginning. You have a gift, Zoe, and a story that inspires people. What if you could turn this into something even more impactful?" Zoe considered her words, excitement bubbling beneath her exhaustion. "You mean like starting something bigger than just a bake sale?" "Exactly," Lisa said with a grin. "A project that could help more people, just like your grandmother always taught you." Zoe's mind raced with possibilities. The idea of turning her passion into a way to make a lasting difference ignited something within her. She glanced at Evelyn, who was chatting with Claire nearby, and felt a renewed sense of purpose. "I want to try," Zoe said, her voice steady. "I want to make something that lasts." Lisa placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "And I will be here to help you every step of the way." As they loaded the car with the remaining baked goods, Zoe felt a flicker of hope she had not felt in months. The road ahead was uncertain, but she was ready to face it, armed with her grandmother's wisdom, Lisa's mentorship, and the kindness of those who believed in her. For the first time in a long time, Zoe dared to dream of a brighter future. The hum of activity at the community center had barely faded when Zoe began sketching her next big idea. She sat at the small kitchen table late into the night, pencil in hand, surrounded by notebooks filled with half-formed plans and rough drawings. Evelyn dozed on the couch nearby, her labored breathing a quiet reminder of why Zoe had to push forward. The bake sales were helping, but it still was not enough. "What if we could do more?" Zoe whispered to herself, flipping through her notes. Lisa's words echoed in her mind. "Think bigger. You have a gift and a story that inspires people." By morning, Zoe had a plan. The next day, Zoe called Lisa and Claire to meet her at the community center. She arrived with a large poster board tucked under her arm and a nervous energy that made her pace in front of the center's entrance. When they arrived, she greeted them with a determined smile. "I have an idea," Zoe began, laying the poster board on a table inside the center. I want to start a community bake sale initiative, not just one bake sale at a time, but a series of them, all over town. Claire and Lisa exchanged glances, their curiosity piqued. Imagine this, Zoe continued, pointing to her sketches of bake sale setups at parks, schools, and churches. Different people in the community could host bake sales, with the money going to help families like mine or anyone who needs it. Lisa leaned closer, studying the details. That is ambitious, Zoe, but it could work. You would need volunteers, though. A lot of them. I know, Zoe admitted, but people want to help. They showed us that at the last bake sale. If I can get them involved, I think this could really make a difference. Claire nodded thoughtfully. It is a big undertaking, but I have seen what you can do. I think you are ready for this. Zoe's face lit up with hope. Do you think people will join in? Lisa smiled. If they see your passion, they will. Let's make it happen. For the next 2 weeks, Zoe threw herself into organizing. She spent hours creating flyers and handouts, drafting letters to local businesses, and even setting up a simple website with Claire's help. The website, titled Baking for a Better Tomorrow, included information about how to host a bake sale, recipes, and contact information for anyone who wanted to get involved. Lisa helped Zoe refine her pitch. Keep it simple, she advised. Tell them what you are doing, why it matters, and how they can help. Zoe practiced her speech in front of Evelyn, who smiled proudly despite her fatigue. You are going to do great, sweetheart, Evelyn said, squeezing her hand. Just speak from the heart. The first community bake sale event was held in the parking lot of Mr. Patel's grocery store. With his enthusiastic support, Zoe had access to tables, chairs, and even a small sound system. Volunteers began to trickle in early that morning. Neighbors, friends, and even a few people Zoe had never met. Among them was Ellie, a teenager whose family Evelyn had helped years ago. I heard about what you were doing, and I wanted to help, Ellie said, handing Zoe a jar filled with crumpled bills. This is all I have, but I hope it helps. Zoe's throat tightened as she accepted the jar. Thank you, she said, her voice thick with emotion. It means so much. By noon, the parking lot was bustling with activity. Tables overflowed with cookies, cupcakes, and pies, each donated by volunteers. People of all ages stopped by, purchasing treats and leaving generous donations. Zoe worked tirelessly, managing the event with a confidence she had never felt before. You are a natural at this, Lisa said, watching as Zoe greeted a group of customers. Look at how everyone is rallying around you. Zoe glanced around, her heart swelling with pride. It is not just me. It is all of us. Everyone is coming together to make this happen. As the event wound down, Claire approached Zoe with an envelope in hand. We have a tally, she said with a smile. You raised over $1,200 today. Zoe's eyes widened. Really? That is amazing. It is more than just money, Zoe, Claire said. You are bringing people together in a way that is rare. This is just the beginning. The success of the first event ignited a wave of momentum. Over the next few months, Zoe organized bake sales in parks, schools, and churches across town. Each one drew larger crowds and more volunteers. Local businesses began to take notice, offering donations of ingredients and supplies. Even small cafes and bakeries joined in, hosting their own bake sales to support the cause. One Saturday morning, Zoe hosted an event at the town square. She set up a table with information about the initiative, sharing Evelyn's story with anyone who stopped to listen. This is more than just baking, Zoe told a small group of onlookers. It is about helping families when they need it most. My grandmother taught me that kindness can change lives, and I want to keep her legacy alive. The group applauded, and several people signed up to host their own bake sales. Zoe's heart swelled with gratitude. Back at home, Evelyn watched Zoe's progress with a mixture of pride and wistfulness. "You are doing something incredible," she said one evening, as Zoe recounted the day's successes. "But remember to take care of yourself too, sweetheart." "I will, Grandma," Zoe promised. But as she looked at Evelyn's tired face, she could not ignore the gnawing worry that time was running out. One evening, after a particularly successful event, Zoe sat on the porch with Lisa, watching the sunset. "Do you think I am doing enough?" Zoe asked quietly. Lisa turned to her, her expression kind. "You are doing more than most people could ever dream of. But remember, this is not just about the work. It is about the people you are helping and the love you are carrying forward from your grandmother." Zoe nodded, Lisa's words settling into her heart. She thought of Evelyn, whose unwavering kindness had been the foundation of everything she did. As long as she kept that love alive, she knew she could keep going. The next bake sale was Zoe's most ambitious yet. With Lisa's help and the momentum of past successes, she had secured a spot at the town's annual summer fair. It was the perfect opportunity to share her initiative with a wider audience. But as the event drew closer, Zoe's nerves began to build. Sitting at the kitchen table late one night, Zoe glanced at the growing to-do list in front of her. Her hand hovered over a half-written flyer, the words blurring as exhaustion crept in. Across the room, Evelyn dozed in her armchair, her breathing slow but steady. "You are pushing yourself too hard," Lisa said, setting down a steaming mug of tea on the table. She had come by to help, but her focus was now on Zoe's weary expression. Zoe sighed, brushing a stray hair from her face. "There is just so much to do. If this event does not go well, it could all fall apart." Lisa sat beside her, her voice calm. "Zoe, listen to me. You have already achieved so much. This is not about perfection, it is about heart. People are drawn to your story because it is real. Trust yourself and the community you have built." Zoe nodded, her tension easing slightly. I want to make my grandmother proud." Lisa placed a reassuring hand on Zoe's shoulder. "You already have." The morning of the summer fair dawned bright and warm. The town square buzzed with activity as vendors set up their stalls. Zoe's booth, located near the main stage, was a colorful display of baked goods, banners, and donation jars. Volunteers bustled around her, arranging trays of cookies and cupcakes while Lisa organized the supplies. "You have got this," Claire said as she arrived with her husband and 2 young children in tow. She handed Zoe a small box. "These are from my kids. They wanted to bake something for your sale." Zoe opened the box to find slightly misshapen sugar cookies, decorated with cheerful, messy icing. Her heart swelled as she looked up at Claire. "Thank you. These are perfect." By noon, the bake sale was in full swing. Crowds gathered around Zoe's booth, purchasing treats and asking about her initiative. Zoe greeted each person with a warm smile, sharing her grandmother's story and the mission of baking for a better tomorrow. "Your grandmother sounds like an amazing woman," one woman said as she placed a generous donation into the jar. "What you are doing is inspiring." "Thank you," Zoe replied, her voice steady despite the lump forming in her throat. Midway through the event, Evelyn arrived, escorted by Claire's husband. Though frail, Evelyn insisted on being there to see Zoe in action. She sat in a shaded area near the booth, watching proudly as Zoe interacted with the crowd. "You are a star," Evelyn said when Zoe took a moment to sit with her. "I cannot believe how far you have come." Zoe squeezed her grandmother's hand, her chest tight with emotion. "It is all because of you, Grandma. You taught me everything." Evelyn smiled, though a hint of sadness flickered in her eyes. "You have always had it in you, sweetheart. I just gave you a little nudge." As the day wore on, the booth grew busier. A local news crew arrived to cover the fair, and upon hearing about Zoe's initiative, asked for an interview. "Can you tell us what inspired this project?" the reporter asked, holding a microphone toward Zoe. Zoe took a deep breath, glancing at Evelyn before answering. It started as a way to help my grandmother with her medical bills. She has always been my inspiration, her kindness, her resilience, and the way she brings people together. I wanted to carry that forward and create something that could help others, just like she has helped me. The reporter smiled warmly. And what do you hope to achieve? I hope to show people that even small acts of kindness can make a big difference, Zoe said, and that when we come together as a community, we can overcome anything. The story aired that evening, and the response was immediate. Donations poured in through Zoe's website, and messages of support flooded her email. One stood out, an offer from a local philanthropist, Ms. Turner, who wanted to meet Zoe and discuss funding opportunities for her initiative. "You have captured the heart of this town," Lisa said, beaming as she read through the messages with Zoe. Zoe's excitement was tempered by worry as she glanced at Evelyn, who had grown quieter as the day wore on. Later that evening, after the bake sale had been packed up and everyone had gone home, Zoe found her grandmother sitting in the living room, staring out the window. "Are you feeling okay, Grandma?" Zoe asked, sitting beside her. Evelyn reached for her hand, her grip weak but steady. "I am so proud of you, Zoe, but I need you to promise me something." Zoe's stomach tightened. "Anything." "Promise me that you will keep going, no matter what," Evelyn said, her voice soft but firm. "You are building something incredible, and the world needs people like you." Tears welled in Zoe's eyes. "I promise, Grandma, but I cannot do it without you." Evelyn smiled faintly, her gaze tender. "You can, and you will." That night, Zoe lay awake, replaying Evelyn's words in her mind. She felt the weight of the promise she had made, but also a deep resolve to honor it. Her grandmother's legacy was more than just a memory. It was a guiding light, one that would lead her forward no matter how uncertain the road ahead. The days after the summer fair passed in a blur of excitement and exhaustion. Zoe threw herself into her work, coordinating follow-up bake sales, responding to messages from supporters, and drafting plans for the future. The world seemed to be opening up for her initiative, and for the first time, she felt as though she was truly making a difference. But at home, Evelyn's condition continued to worsen. Her coughs became deeper, and the spark that had always lit up her eyes seemed to dim. Zoe tried to ignore the gnawing worry that pressed at the edges of her thoughts, but the truth was unavoidable. Time was slipping away. One evening, Zoe was sitting at the kitchen table, reviewing a list of potential new bake sale locations, when she heard Evelyn call her name softly from the living room. "Zoe, sweetheart," Evelyn said, her voice thin but warm. Zoe hurried to her side, kneeling beside the armchair where Evelyn sat. "Do you need anything, Grandma? Are you feeling okay?" Evelyn smiled faintly, reaching for Zoe's hand. "I am fine, love. I just wanted to talk to you." Zoe nodded, though her chest tightened. "What is it?" Evelyn's gaze was steady, though her voice trembled. "You have grown into such a strong, kind young woman. I see so much of your parents in you, your mother's determination, your father's big heart. They would be so proud of you." Zoe's throat tightened. "Grandma, please, do not talk like this." "Listen to me, Zoe," Evelyn said, her tone gentle but firm. "I do not have much time left, and there are things I need you to hear. I need you to know that you are never alone. You carry the love of everyone who has ever cared for you, and that love will guide you." Tears filled Zoe's eyes. "But I need you, Grandma. I do not know how to do this without you." Evelyn squeezed her hand, her touch frail but comforting. "You do not have to know everything, sweetheart. You just have to keep going. Promise me you will keep going." Zoe nodded, her tears falling freely. "I promise." That night, Evelyn's condition took a sharp turn. She struggled to catch her breath, clutching her chest as Zoe called for an ambulance. The ride to the hospital was a blur. Zoe's mind racing with panic and fear. She clung to Evelyn's hand the entire time, whispering reassurances she was not sure she believed. At the hospital, Evelyn was admitted immediately. The sterile halls and beeping machines only heightened Zoe's sense of helplessness. She sat in the waiting room, her hands trembling as she clutched her phone. Lisa arrived soon after, wrapping Zoe in a comforting hug. "She is in good hands," Lisa said softly. "And you are not alone in this." Zoe nodded, though her heart felt like it was breaking. The next morning, the doctor approached Zoe and Lisa in the waiting room. Her expression was kind, but somber. "Evelyn is stable for now, but her heart is very weak. We are doing everything we can, but you should prepare yourselves." The words hit Zoe like a physical blow. She nodded silently, her mind numb as she followed the doctor to Evelyn's room. Inside, Evelyn lay surrounded by wires and monitors, her face pale but peaceful. "Hey there, my sweet girl," Evelyn said, her voice barely above a whisper. Zoe rushed to her side, taking her hand. "I am here, Grandma," she said, her voice trembling. "I am not going anywhere." Evelyn smiled faintly. "I know you are not." For hours, Zoe stayed by her grandmother's side, holding her hand and talking about everything they had built together. She told Evelyn about the future of baking for a better tomorrow, about the people they had helped, and the ones they still would. "You have already done so much," Evelyn said, "and you will do so much more. I believe in you." As the evening wore on, Evelyn's breathing grew more labored. The nurse gently explained that the end was near. Zoe's heart shattered, but she refused to leave her grandmother's side. "I love you, Grandma," Zoe said through her tears. "I will make you proud, I promise." Evelyn smiled one last time, her gaze filled with love. "I know you will, sweetheart. I know you will." With those words, Evelyn's breathing slowed, and the monitors went silent. Zoe clung to her hand, her sobs breaking the stillness of the room. Lisa wrapped her arms around Zoe, holding her tightly as they grieved together. The days following Evelyn's passing were a haze of sorrow and disbelief. The house felt unbearably quiet without her presence. Zoe spent hours sitting in the living room, staring at old photographs of Evelyn, her heart aching with loss. One evening, Lisa sat beside Zoe, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Your grandmother would want you to keep going," she said gently. "She believed in you, and so do I." Zoe nodded, though the thought of moving forward felt impossible. "It just hurts so much," she whispered. "She was my everything." "I know," Lisa said, "and she always will be. Everything you do from here on out is a part of her legacy. She is still with you, Zoe, in every act of kindness, in every bit of love you give." Zoe's tears fell silently as she considered Lisa's words. Deep down, she knew they were true. The day of Evelyn's funeral was somber, but filled with love. Friends, neighbors, and supporters gathered at the small chapel, sharing stories of Evelyn's kindness and resilience. Zoe stood at the front, clutching a single white rose as she addressed the crowd. "My grandmother taught me that even when you have very little, you can still give so much," Zoe said, her voice trembling. "She showed me the power of kindness and the strength of love. Everything I am is because of her, and I will carry her legacy forward every day of my life." After the ceremony, Zoe placed the rose on Evelyn's casket, whispering, "I will make you proud, Grandma. I promise." That evening, back at home, Zoe sat in the kitchen, staring at the baking tools Evelyn had left behind. Slowly, she picked up a rolling pin and began kneading dough, tears streaming down her face as the familiar motions brought a sense of comfort. "You can do this," she whispered to herself, "for her." As the dough took shape, so did Zoe's resolve. She would honor Evelyn's memory by continuing their work, spreading kindness and hope to as many people as possible. The spark of resilience that Evelyn had kindled in her heart burned brighter than ever. The first few days after Evelyn's funeral passed in a blur of grief and quiet reflection. The house felt emptier than ever, its silence a reminder of all that Zoe had lost. Still, she clung to the promise she had made to her grandmother. She would keep going, for Evelyn, for herself, and for the people who believed in her. On a cloudy morning, Zoe sat at the kitchen table, staring at a stack of unopened mail, bills, condolence cards, and pamphlets for support services littered the table. The sheer weight of it all threatened to overwhelm her. Her hands shook as she reached for an envelope, but a knock at the door startled her before she could open it. Lisa stood on the porch, holding a tray of freshly baked muffins. She smiled warmly as Zoe opened the door. "Thought you could use some company," Lisa said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "And I brought breakfast." Zoe offered a weak smile. "Thank you. I was not really up to cooking this morning." Lisa set the tray on the table and pulled out a chair. "How are you holding up?" Zoe shrugged, avoiding Lisa's gaze. "I do not know. Some moments feel okay, but most of the time, it just hurts." Lisa nodded, her expression softening. "That is normal, Zoe. Grief is not something you can rush through. It is something you carry, and over time, it becomes lighter. But it never truly goes away." Zoe looked up, tears brimming in her eyes. "What if I am not strong enough? What if I cannot do what Grandma wanted?" Lisa reached across the table, taking Zoe's hand in hers. "You are stronger than you think, and you do not have to do it all at once. One step at a time, Zoe. That is how you move forward." Later that afternoon, Zoe found herself in the kitchen, staring at the tools her grandmother had always used. The wooden rolling pin with its worn edges, the faded mixing bowls, and the recipe cards smudged with flour. She took a deep breath and pulled out a card labeled "Lemon Pound Cake, Mom's Favorite." It was Evelyn's favorite recipe, one they had made countless times together. Zoe gathered the ingredients and set to work. As she measured, mixed, and folded the batter, memories of her grandmother's patient guidance came flooding back. Her grief softened into something quieter, something steadier, a deep love that would always be with her. When the cake was done, its golden crust filling the air with a familiar, comforting aroma, Zoe took a slice and sat at the kitchen table. The first bite brought tears to her eyes. It tasted like home, like her grandmother's warmth and love. Over the next few weeks, baking became Zoe's way of healing. She spent hours experimenting with new recipes, pouring her emotions into every batch. Lisa often stopped by to help, bringing ingredients and stories that made Zoe laugh despite herself. One day, as they worked on a batch of chocolate chip cookies, Lisa glanced at Zoe thoughtfully. "You know, I have been hearing a lot of people ask about the bake sale initiative. They are wondering when the next one will be." Zoe hesitated, her hands stilling over the cookie dough. "I do not know if I am ready yet. What if it is too soon?" Lisa placed a hand on Zoe's shoulder. "It is okay to take your time. But remember, this initiative is part of your grandmother's legacy. It is a way to honor her and keep her spirit alive." Zoe nodded slowly, Lisa's words settling into her heart. "You are right. I want to keep going. I just need to figure out how." Lisa smiled. "And I will be here to help you every step of the way." With Lisa's encouragement, Zoe began planning a new bake sale, one that would honor Evelyn's memory while bringing the community together. She decided to hold it at the community center, the place where her initiative had truly taken off. She reached out to Claire, who offered to help with logistics, and contacted local businesses for donations. The response was overwhelming. People from all over town offered to bake, volunteer, and spread the word. On the day of the event, the community center was transformed into a vibrant hub of activity. Tables overflowed with cookies, cakes, and pies. each lovingly prepared by volunteers. A large banner hung above the entrance, reading, "Baking for a Better Tomorrow," in memory of Evelyn Carter. Zoe stood at the center of it all, her heart swelling with both pride and sorrow. She wore her grandmother's favorite apron, its faded floral pattern, a comforting reminder of Evelyn's presence. "You ready?" Lisa asked, standing beside her. Zoe took a deep breath and nodded. "Let's do this." As the bake sale began, people streamed through the doors, purchasing treats and leaving generous donations. Families, friends, and even strangers came together, their laughter and chatter filling the space with warmth. One by one, people approached Zoe to share their stories. A mother thanked her for inspiring her daughter to start baking. A young man said he had been moved by her grandmother's story and wanted to help in any way he could. "You have created something really special here," Claire said, as she handed Zoe an envelope filled with donations. "Your grandmother would be so proud." Tears welled in Zoe's eyes, but she smiled through them. "Thank you. That means everything to me." By the end of the day, the bake sale had raised more money than Zoe could have imagined. As she packed up the remaining baked goods, she felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. She had kept her promise to Evelyn. She had kept going. Later that evening, Zoe sat on the porch, watching the stars twinkle in the clear night sky. Lisa joined her, handing her a cup of tea. "You did it," Lisa said, her voice filled with pride. "You brought people together. You honored your grandmother." Zoe nodded, a small smile playing at her lips. "It still hurts," she admitted, "but I feel like she is with me, like she always will be." "She is," Lisa said gently, "and she always will be." As they sat together in the quiet of the evening, Zoe felt a spark of hope flicker within her. The road ahead would not be easy, but she knew she was not alone. With the love of her grandmother and the support of her community, she could face whatever came next. The morning sun filtered through the windows of the community center as Zoe reviewed the plans for her next big event. She sat at a folding table surrounded by notes, flyers, and a schedule scrawled across a whiteboard. The bake sale initiative had grown beyond anything she could have imagined. More neighborhoods were hosting events, and donations were steadily increasing. Still, Zoe felt a pang of nervousness about what lay ahead. Today, she would be speaking at a city council meeting, her first time addressing a group of leaders about the initiative. The idea had come from Claire, who had encouraged Zoe to seek official support to expand baking for a better tomorrow. The council's approval could open doors to more funding and resources, but it also meant standing in front of a room full of adults, many of whom might not take her seriously. "You've got this," Lisa said, as she packed a box of pastries to take to the meeting. "Just remember, they're people just like the ones who show up at your bake sales. Speak from your heart, and they'll listen." Zoe nodded, though her palms were already damp with nerves. "What if they don't? What if they think I'm just a kid with a silly idea?" Lisa stopped what she was doing and looked Zoe in the eye. "Then show them they're wrong. What you've built isn't silly, it's powerful. You've brought people together in a way most adults couldn't dream of. That's worth listening to." Zoe took a deep breath and straightened her shoulders. "Okay, let's do this." The city council chambers were larger than Zoe had expected, with rows of seats facing a long table where the council members sat. The room hummed with quiet conversation as attendees settled into their seats. Zoe clutched her notes tightly as Claire guided her to the front row. "You're going to do great," Claire whispered. "Just take your time and remember why you're here." When Zoe's name was called, she walked to the podium, her heart pounding. She placed her notes on the stand and glanced at the crowd. For a moment, her nerves threatened to overwhelm her. But then she saw Lisa and Claire smiling encouragingly from the audience. "My name is Zoe Carter," she began, her voice steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. "I'm the founder of Baking for a Better Tomorrow. a community bake sale initiative that helps families in need. She took a deep breath and continued. This project started as a way to raise money for my grandmother's medical bills. She taught me that even when you have very little, you can still give so much. After she passed away, I wanted to carry her legacy forward. Today, we've raised thousands of dollars to support families across our town, and we're just getting started. Zoe spoke about the people who had joined her cause, the businesses that had offered donations, and the lives that had been touched by the bake sales. She shared her vision of expanding the initiative to include workshops for young bakers and a community kitchen where families could gather to cook, share, and connect. I'm here today to ask for your support, she concluded. With your help, we can reach more people, provide more resources, and build something that lasts. Together, we can make a difference. The room was quiet for a moment after Zoe finished, and she felt a flicker of doubt. Then, one of the council members, a woman with kind eyes, spoke up. Zoe, thank you for sharing your story. What you've done is truly remarkable. I think we'd all agree that this initiative deserves our support. The rest of the council nodded, and Zoe felt a wave of relief and pride. As the meeting concluded, several council members approached her to express their admiration and offer suggestions for partnerships and grants. You're an inspiration, one said. Keep going. You're making a real impact. That evening, Zoe returned home exhausted, but elated. She sat on the porch with Lisa and Claire, watching the stars blink against the dark sky. You were incredible today, Lisa said, handing Zoe a cup of tea. You owned that room. Zoe smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. I couldn't have done it without you both. Thank you for always believing in me. Claire leaned back in her chair, a contented expression on her face. You don't need us to believe in you. You've already proven what you're capable of. But we're here, no matter what. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. With the council's support, Zoe secured a grant to fund the creation of a community kitchen. She envisioned a space where people could learn to bake, host events, and share meals. As word spread, volunteers stepped forward to help with construction, donations poured in, and local businesses offered equipment and supplies. The project was taking shape, and Zoe felt a renewed sense of purpose with every step. One afternoon, as Zoe stood in the nearly completed kitchen, she ran her fingers over the polished counters, imagining the possibilities. She could see children learning to bake for the first time, families sharing meals, and neighbors coming together to support one another. Your grandmother would be so proud of you, Lisa said, stepping into the room. This is everything she stood for. Zoe nodded, her throat tight with emotion. I hope so. Everything I do is for her. Lisa placed a hand on Zoe's shoulder. And she'd want you to know that this is also for you. You're not just carrying her legacy, you're building your own. The grand opening of the community kitchen was a celebration unlike any other. Families gathered in the courtyard, sharing stories, laughter, and food. A large sign hung above the entrance, reading, Evelyn's Table, a place for all. As Zoe stepped onto the stage to address the crowd, she felt a surge of emotion. She spoke about her grandmother's kindness, the journey that had brought her here, and the power of community. This kitchen isn't just a building, she said. It's a promise that no one has to face their challenges alone, and that even small acts of kindness can change lives. Thank you for believing in this dream and helping to make it a reality. The crowd erupted into applause, and Zoe felt tears sting her eyes. As she stepped down, Lisa pulled her into a hug. You did it, Lisa said, her voice thick with emotion. You've created something beautiful. Zoe smiled, her heart full. We did it. Together. Later that night, as Zoe sat on the steps of Evelyn's table, she looked up at the stars and whispered, Thank you, Grandma. This is for you. In that moment, she felt a deep sense of peace, The journey had been difficult, but it had also been filled with love, resilience, and hope. And as she looked toward the future, she knew she was ready for whatever came next. The opening of Evelyn's table was the talk of the town. The community kitchen, bustling with activity, quickly became a hub for connection and kindness. Neighbors stopped by to share recipes, families attended baking workshops, and volunteers hosted weekly meal-sharing events. For Zoe, it was more than a kitchen. It was a realization of her grandmother's dream. One crisp autumn morning, Zoe arrived early at Evelyn's table. The air was filled with the comforting scent of fresh bread, and sunlight streamed through the wide kitchen windows, casting a warm glow over the space. She ran her fingers across the polished counters and smiled, imagining the countless lives that would be touched here. Lisa entered, carrying a box of donated ingredients. "Busy day ahead," she said with a grin. "The kids' baking workshop starts at 10, and the meal prep team will be here soon after." Zoe nodded, her heart swelling with pride. "It's everything I hoped it would be and more." Lisa set the box down and leaned against the counter. "You've done something incredible, Zoe, but this is just the beginning." Zoe's schedule grew busier as Evelyn's table expanded its reach. She met with local business owners to discuss partnerships, reached out to nearby schools to offer cooking classes, and worked with Claire to secure funding for future projects. The kitchen became a symbol of hope, not just for Zoe, but for the entire community. One day, as Zoe was reviewing plans for an upcoming fundraiser, she received an unexpected call. The voice on the other end was warm and professional. "Hello, Zoe. This is Vanessa Turner. I'm a philanthropist who came across your story in the news. I'd love to meet and discuss how I can support your work." Zoe's heart raced. Vanessa Turner was well known for funding community-driven initiatives across the state. If she got involved, it could mean the resources Zoe needed to take Evelyn's table to the next level. The meeting was set for the following week at a local cafe. Zoe arrived early, her hands clasped tightly around a notebook filled with ideas and figures. When Vanessa entered, she was striking in her confidence, her tailored blazer and poised demeanor radiating authority. But her smile was warm and disarming. "Zoe, it's so nice to finally meet you," Vanessa said, shaking her hand. "Your work is inspiring." "Thank you for taking the time to meet with me," Zoe replied, her voice steady, despite the nerves fluttering in her chest. Over coffee, Zoe shared the journey of Evelyn's table, from its humble beginnings as a bake sale to its current role as a community cornerstone. Vanessa listened intently, occasionally jotting down notes. "You've accomplished so much already," Vanessa said when Zoe finished. "What's your vision for the future?" Zoe hesitated, then spoke from the heart. "I want to create more spaces like Evelyn's table places where people can come together, share meals, and find support. I also want to start programs that teach life skills, like budgeting and cooking, to help families become more self-sufficient." Vanessa nodded, her expression thoughtful. "I see so much potential in what you're doing. I'd like to help you expand. With funding and connections, we can replicate this model in other towns." Zoe's eyes widened. "You'd really want to do that?" "Absolutely," Vanessa said. "Your grandmother's legacy deserves to reach as many people as possible." Over the next few months, Vanessa's involvement transformed Evelyn's table. With her funding, Zoe was able to hire a small staff, purchase additional equipment, and renovate the space to include a larger dining area. Plans for a second location in a neighboring town were set in motion. Despite the rapid growth, Zoe remained grounded in her mission. She continued to lead workshops, bake alongside volunteers, and greet every visitor with the same warmth her grandmother had shown to everyone she met. But with success came challenges. Some questioned Zoe's leadership, doubting that someone so young could manage such a large operation. Others criticized her for accepting outside funding, claiming it would dilute the initiative's grassroots origins. "You can't please everyone," Lisa reminded her one evening as they cleaned up after a busy day. Focus on the people you're helping. That's what matters. Zoe nodded, though the criticism weighed on her. She thought of her grandmother's advice. Do what's right, not what's easy. One evening, after a particularly challenging day, Zoe found herself alone in the kitchen. The quiet hum of the refrigerators and the faint scent of cinnamon rolls lingered in the air. She pulled out a photo of Evelyn that she kept in her office, her fingers tracing the worn edges. "I hope I'm making you proud," she whispered, her voice barely audible. As if in answer, a gentle knock sounded at the door. Zoe opened it to find a young girl, no older than 12, clutching a small notebook. "Hi," the girl said, her voice trembling. "My name's Danielle. I heard about what you do here and I want to learn how to bake." Zoe knelt to meet her gaze, her heart swelling with recognition. Danielle's wide eyes and timid demeanor reminded her of her younger self, standing at the edge of possibility. "You came to the right place," Zoe said with a smile. "Come on in. Let's get started." Danielle became a regular at Evelyn's table, attending every workshop and helping with bake sales. She quickly grew more confident, her excitement for baking shining through in everything she did. Watching Danielle's transformation reignited Zoe's sense of purpose, reminding her why she had started this journey in the first place. One afternoon, as they worked on a batch of cookies, Danielle looked up at Zoe with wide eyes. "Do you think I could ever do what you do?" Zoe smiled, handing Danielle a rolling pin. "I know you can. You've got the heart for it. And that's what matters most." The following weeks brought more growth, more challenges, and more victories. Evelyn's table became a beacon of hope, not just for the town, but for everyone who visited. And through it all, Zoe carried her grandmother's spirit with her, a constant source of strength and inspiration. As she stood in the bustling kitchen one evening, watching volunteers laugh and work together, Zoe felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She had built something lasting, something that mattered, and she knew that this was only the beginning. The grand opening of the second location for Evelyn's table was a crisp fall morning, the kind that carried the promise of change. Zoe stood outside the new space, a converted warehouse now gleaming with fresh paint and a sign that read, "Evelyn's Table, Community Kitchen." Volunteers hustled to arrange tables of baked goods, donation jars, and handouts about upcoming workshops. As she watched the crowd gather, Zoe felt a mixture of pride and disbelief. What had started as a small bake sale in her front yard had grown into something much bigger. This second location wasn't just a milestone, it was a testament to the power of community and the enduring strength her grandmother had passed down to her. Lisa walked up beside her, holding a cup of coffee. "Take a moment to soak it all in," she said, her voice filled with pride. "You've built something amazing." Zoe smiled, her chest swelling with gratitude. "We've built something amazing," she corrected. "I couldn't have done this without you or without everyone who believed in me." Lisa tilted her head, a playful grin tugging at her lips. "You're too humble. But okay, we'll call it teamwork." The ribbon-cutting ceremony was a celebration of everything Evelyn's table represented. Local leaders spoke about the impact the first location had made, and Vanessa Turner praised Zoe's vision and leadership. When Zoe took the microphone, she paused for a moment, looking out at the sea of faces, some familiar, others new. She felt the weight of the moment, but also the joy of knowing she was continuing her grandmother's legacy. "Thank you all for being here today," Zoe began, her voice steady but full of emotion. "This kitchen is more than a building. It's a place where people can come together, support one another, and find hope. It's a dream my grandmother, Evelyn Carter, inspired. She believed that even small acts of kindness could change lives, and she taught me to believe the same." She glanced at the sign above the entrance, its bold letters a tribute to the woman who had shaped her life. "This kitchen is for her and for everyone who has ever needed a little help. Together, We can build something that lasts." The crowd erupted into applause, and Zoe felt tears prick her eyes. She stepped down from the stage and was immediately surrounded by supporters offering congratulations and words of encouragement. The weeks that followed were some of the busiest of Zoe's life. With 2 kitchens to manage, she found herself juggling workshops, community events, and partnerships with local organizations. Despite the challenges, Zoe thrived. She had learned to lean on her team and delegate tasks, allowing her to focus on what mattered most, connecting with the people her work was helping. One afternoon, as she prepared for a workshop at the original Evelyn's table, Danielle walked into the kitchen, her face glowing with excitement. "I finished my project," Danielle said, holding up a binder filled with handwritten recipes and sketches of baked goods. Zoe smiled, taking the binder and flipping through its pages. "This is incredible, Danielle. You've put so much work into it." Danielle beamed. "I want to open my own bakery someday. Do you think I can?" Zoe knelt to meet Danielle's gaze, her own journey flashing through her mind. "I don't think you can. I know you can. You've got everything you need: passion, talent, and heart. And when the time comes, I'll be here to help you, just like so many people helped me." Danielle threw her arms around Zoe, and for a moment, the room seemed to glow with the love and hope Evelyn's table had come to symbolize. As the year went on, Zoe's vision continued to grow. She launched new programs, including a mentorship initiative for young bakers like Danielle and a food-sharing network that connected surplus donations with families in need. Each step forward brought new challenges, but Zoe faced them with the same determination her grandmother had instilled in her. Whenever doubt crept in, she thought of Evelyn's words: "Do what's right, not what's easy." One evening, after a long day at the second kitchen, Zoe returned home and found herself drawn to her grandmother's old photo albums. She flipped through the pages, smiling at pictures of Evelyn in her younger years, always surrounded by family and friends. As she turned the final page, she found a handwritten note tucked inside. The paper was yellowed and slightly crinkled, but the familiar handwriting was unmistakable. "Dear Zoe," the note read, "if you're reading this, it means I'm not there to tell you how proud I am. But know this: you have always been my greatest joy. Keep believing in yourself, and never forget the power of love and kindness. You have everything you need to build a beautiful life. With all my love, Grandma." Tears streamed down Zoe's face as she clutched the note to her chest. It felt like Evelyn had reached across time to give her one last gift, a reminder that she was never truly alone. Months later, Zoe stood outside Evelyn's table's third location, this one in a small rural town that had welcomed her initiative with open arms. As she prepared to cut the ribbon, she glanced at the young volunteers around her and the families who had gathered to celebrate. In the crowd, she spotted Danielle, now a confident teenager, helping another young girl arrange a tray of cookies. Nearby, Lisa and Claire chatted with a group of parents, their faces glowing with pride. Zoe took a deep breath and smiled. She wasn't just honoring her grandmother's legacy, she was building her own. Evelyn's table was no longer just a kitchen. It was a movement, one that would continue to grow and touch countless lives. As the crowd cheered and the ribbon fell away, Zoe felt a deep sense of peace. She looked up at the sky, the stars just beginning to peek through the twilight, and whispered, "Thank you, Grandma. This is for you." In that moment, she knew she had done exactly what Evelyn would have wanted, turned love into action, hope into purpose, and a small idea into something extraordinary. The journey wasn't over. It never would be. But Zoe was ready for whatever came next. As Zoe's journey shows, small acts of kindness can grow into something extraordinary when fueled by love, resilience, and community. Her story reminds us that even in the face of loss and challenges, hope and determination can light the way forward. If you've been inspired by Zoe's story and the legacy of Evelyn's table, take a moment to reflect on how you can bring a little more kindness into the world. And if you'd like more stories that celebrate perseverance, community, and the power of the human spirit, be sure to subscribe to our channel. Let's continue spreading hope, one story at a time. Thank you for watching.